Here, I have forms of irregular verbs, and usually, remember, they're irregular because they'll either have a verbal root that you can't anticipate, or you might have actually more than one verbal root, a couple of them, or three of them sometimes. And so if it has more than one verbal root, then you simply have to memorize which verbal root is used for the aorist passive and the future passive forms. So let's look at the word thello, for example. It has one verbal root, but it's something that you don't really anticipate. Remember that theoretically the verbal root actually has an epsilon in front of it, and it could have another vowel after the lambda. And notice the aorist form. You have the epsilon showing up because this is the augment, not the short epsilon. And then this epsilon here, as part of the stem, shows up here as something that compensatory lengthens, like we would in the contract verbs. Thelathane means I was wanted, or I was wished for. And then for kaleo, remember that this is a fake contract. It looks like a contract verb only in the present and the imperfect tense, but when it uses the verbal root for all the other tenses, it's kaleg, and it has a modified stem. This modified stem reverses the kappa and the lambda, and so the letters get switched around. So ekleithane is I was called. For ginomai, it also is a little bit irregular because it inserts that eta there. You don't expect that. So it's again a thing. I became. It's a deponent verb. So I don't translate it in a passive way. This is a passive form used in a deponent way. I became, againethane. And it's irregular because you don't expect that eta there, but it is. And again, it's probably because of pronunciation. If you say againthane, that's really hard to say. And so over time, it was just simply easier to say againethane, and then it became grammaticalized, and that became the permanent form. Erkamai doesn't have an aorist passive or a future passive form because it means I go, I come. And by virtue of its meaning, try to say go and come in a passive way, and it doesn't work. And so there is no form for it in Greek. Same thing with I have, echo. This means I have. Can I say I have in a passive way? You can't, so the form doesn't exist. For lego, horao, ginosko, and pino, these have, lego has two verbal roots. Horao also has two verbal roots. These verbal roots are unexpected. For ginosko, it's gano, and pino, it's p, the new drops. And notice that there's further stem changes, even though, so not only do you have a verbal root that's different, but the stem changes. So here, it does use air for the aorist passive, but it doubles and inserts that epsilon there. It's almost like as if the letters reduplicated itself in a mirror way. So ereithane is I was said, and we don't really hear the word I was said often in the New Testament. It's probably more often you'll see arei the third person singular, which means it was said, and that is something you would hear, like scripture. It was said that before, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but now I say, and so it was said is a form that you would use. Ophthane, you would have to know that opt was the verbal root that you were using, not hurrah. And then opt is a stop stem, so you expect that to aspirate. This is your augment, and you add thing, they, stay, etc. And I was seen. Gano, notice that it uses gano as the stem, but this is unusual. Inserts that sigma there. So it's still an irregular verb, and you just have to remember the sigma is being added to the stem. So eginotsthane is I was known. And look at this one, pino. Pino means I drink. The verbal root is p, but just in that aorist passive. But here it's pa with an omicron. So epothane is I was drunk by the giant who ground my bones, or something like that. In this next slide, we just simply have some more irregular verbs. And these irregular verbs, again, we have the verbal roots all listed out here. And we can note that even though lob is the verbal root, it undergoes a stem change in the passage and uses length, the epsilon augment, and the thein, theis, they, theim, and thesan. For ball, its stem change is blay. For hure, with the its stem change is hure, but it adds an epsilon there. So if you see that epsilon, so hure adds that epsilon in between its verbal root and the thein, theis, they, etc. To form urethane, I was found. Akuo, see, its verbal root wants to add this extra sigma to it, so that it also has a stem change. And for duna, you have an irregular augment with the eta, but on top of that, you also have the alpha going on compensatory lengthening. So edunethane is I was able. This is dunamai is a deponent verb, so even in its passive form, it's translated in deponent way. Edunethane, I was able. And so that completes actually the irregular forms. Notice that for this lesson, you're also giving a new third declension paradigm noun. Horus, horus, ta, neuter, means mountain. And this is a different type of third declension class that you have to know. It stems ending with an s, an epsilon sigma. So the stem originally is hores, and what happens is, okay, remember this is a neuter. So let's brush up on your third declension noun endings. For neuter, third declension noun endings, you know the endings for the neuter tense is nothing, os, e, nothing. And then for the plural forms, it's alpha, own, si, or sin, alpha. So if you forgot the noun endings for the third declension nouns, review it. And what I did was, I did it for the neuter forms. So add nothing to the stem hores. And remember, the nominative singulars always do something weird. They always do something irregular sometimes. So horos is the form. This is the nominative singular form for a mountain. And then what happens when I have hores and I add this os to it? All right, so how about the genitive singular? Well, if I add os to it, this sigma drops because, and that's the key thing for this noun type. The sigma will always want to drop when it's sandwiched between two vowels. And so remember your big five little two rules: epsilon plus omicron equals u, this diphthong, and that's why orus is your genitive singular form. Add to hores, this iota, the sigma drops, and then hooray is the dative singular form. And because the nominative singular form and the accusative singular form are exactly the same for the neuters, orus is the accusative singular form as well. Have ores plus the alpha here for the nominative plural form. The sigma drops. When the epsilon alpha combine, it forms this eta. So ore is the plural form, mountains. These are mountains. Oron is of mountains. That's formed when you have the sigma and the own. When the sigma drops from the stem, this omega bullies out the epsilon. It just absorbs it. So the epsilon gets absorbed, and then you have oron of mountains for the genitive plural form. Add to hores, sin, and then you have two like letters. One letter drops out, so horesin is the plural form. And then again, the noun and the plural and the cues of the plural for neuter nouns are the same. So this is ore, this is ore. And this is a rough overview of a new type of third declension noun that you're learning as part of your vocabulary for this chapter.